Good afternoon. On behalf of the Student Council and Peer Leadership Council, I would like to welcome you to the 2021 Elgin Park Virtual Career Webinar. Today, I'm speaking on the shared, traditional, and unceded territory of the Katsi, Semiahmoo, and other Coast Salish peoples. My name is Fifi, and I will be your coordinator for this session. We also have our wonderful PLC and STUCO volunteers here as chat moderators and note takers. So with that being said, I will be passing it over to our student interviewer, Avia, who will introduce our honored speaker today.
Our speaker here today is Mrs. Kristen Hamilton, a registered clinical counselor with the VC Association of Clinical Counselors. Mrs. Kristen Hamilton graduated from Azusa Pacific University in Los Angeles with a master's degree in clinical psychology. Her passion for helping and empowering children, youth, adults, and families motivated her throughout her 10 years of professional experience in hospitals, communities, and private practices. Some of her specializations are depression and anxiety, chronic pain and illness, relationship and attachment issues. I'm very excited today to hear and learn about Mrs. Kristen Hamilton's career journey, and I hope you are all excited as well. So please join me in virtually welcoming Mrs. Kristen Hamilton. So, Mrs. Kristen Hamilton, could you please give an overview of your profession and the educational journey that led to it?
Yeah, so just so you know, I have a dog here that's now barking at someone outside. So I apologize. Hopefully that's the most that you'll hear. So I guess I want to go a little bit farther back because my journey towards counseling actually started when I was a student at Elgin Park. Grade 9, 10, I struggled with some significant depression, and I found myself on my own therapist's couch. And that experience kind of propelled me that I had some of the skills and the empathy for others and the compassion that is necessary for being a counselor. And I also just wanted to help other youth that were feeling similar to how I was. So after I graduated from Elgin Park, I went to Trinity Western and got my bachelor's in psychology. And during that time, I also worked with children with autism for about 2 years. And then I took a year off between undergrad and graduate school to just kind of get a little bit more experience to put on my resume for when I applied to grad school. So during that time, I worked with children with autism, and then I also worked as a women's support worker at a domestic violence shelter here in the Lower Mainland. And then I applied to Azusa Pacific University, which is a university in Los Angeles County, to do my master's in clinical psych with a focus on marriage and family therapy. And I did that not because I wanted to necessarily work with couples, because that's not my forte. I really wanted a family systems lens so that I could work better with youth and families, because that was my major passion at that time, was that I wanted to mostly work with youth. After that, I've worked with child and youth mental health, so working with youth that have mental health issues, whether that's anxiety, depression, trauma. And then for the last 5 years before I started private practice, I was working in a mental health crisis program for youth. So working with youth that presented with lots of suicidal ideation, self-harm, and they found themselves in a really significant mental health crisis and required short-term stabilization. And then I've been in private practice for the last 4 years, and I mainly I do still work with youth, but it's about 50-50. So I work with youth, and then I work with 50% adults, with mainly around relationship issues, depression, anxiety, which for the most part, most of my clients have started with those issues from going back to childhood trauma.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. So what do you think are some of the hard and soft skills of counselor? I know that you mentioned like understanding and empathizing with others, so would that be like a soft skill?
Yeah, when I had to look up what hard skills versus soft skills are, but I would say that hard skills and soft skills really they're they're kind of intertwined when it comes to being a counselor, because a lot of the skills are learned on the job and learned from the supervision that we get. So I would say like the hard skills are obviously like the theories of counseling that we learn in school, and learning about development, human development, child development, also how the brain works, and then learning kind of like ethical and legal issues that come up in the counseling practice. And then I would say the soft skills would be, of course, empathy and listening, being able to have really good communication, to be able to set healthy boundaries with our clients, in order to help them set healthy boundaries in their own lives. And then the other one that I definitely learned on the job is being able to collaborate as a team, especially working in agency work. You have to know how to kind of like navigate the system for clients and be able to help them connect with other professionals in order for them to move forward. So it's a lot of collaborations with your coworkers as a team, whether that's just kind of consulting between clients to be like, am I on the right track? This came up, what would you do? And then also kind of coordinating with psychiatrists and psychologists, or if a client is in the hospital, then you would liaise with the hospital and make sure that there's a proper discharge plan in place. So those are kind of skills that you mainly learn on the job. And with that, I would say that counselors, I think this is across careers, but I would say imposter syndrome is a big thing for counselors. And it's just like fake it till you make it and get practice, and just learn how to trust your own judgment and learn to trust your intuition. Those would be other things that would be soft skills.
Okay, thank you. That was very insightful. So during like communications with your clients, how do you approach to talking to clients when they appear to be not interested in having conversation, and does that occur frequently?
It occurs less frequently now that I'm in private practice, because most of the people coming to see me want to come see me, and they have reached out, whether it's their parents reaching out or them reaching out, they want to be there. So I don't see that so much anymore, but definitely in agency work, I saw that a lot, especially with the mental health crisis program that I worked with, because some of them didn't want to be there. And some of them didn't even want to be on this planet anymore. And so it is hard to engage that type of client. How I approach it is usually with humor. I'm very laid back in my practice, and I really bring my own personality into the room. And so I like thinking back on a couple of clients that just like did not want to talk to me for that first session. And I just used humor and empathize with the fact like that this is really scary. You're in a situation where you're having to talk to someone that's a total stranger that knows nothing about you, and you're already feeling really isolated and really feeling like you're the only one going through this. So I'll sometimes bring that up with them and just say, this is really scary. You're here supposed to be talking about it, really personal things with a total stranger. I get it. This is scary. And what can I do to make it a little bit easier for you? Can I adjust my seating arrangement so that we're not looking face to face? Like, would it be helpful for me to be just kind of like to the side? Would it be helpful for me to kind of lead the session? Would it be helpful if I ask the questions? Or do you want to let it all out? Because a lot of people, when they first come in, are quite anxious, understandably so. And I think we don't know what counseling is going to bring up, and that can be really vulnerable for people. So I just I use humor mostly with teenage clients, and just kind of empathize with where they're at and meet them where they're at. No rushing. Yeah, I don't have an agenda for this. I just want you to get the most out of it.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. So, is there a specific goal for each session, or is it more laid back and it just goes with the flow? And what do counselors provide for their client exactly?
So what we provide is a safe space to explore anything that the client wants to explore, whatever they're open to, whatever their goals are, whether they want to improve their mood, decrease anxiety, whether they want to learn how to better communicate with their partner or their parents. Hold on, Sadie, can you stop? Yeah, just providing that safe space for the client to explore whatever they want to explore. I don't have an agenda going into each session. I might have something that just kind of like made me think after the session, and I might bring something up. Like, I noticed that you said this last time. I wondered whether you might want to talk about this a little bit more. But for the most part, I don't have necessarily goals. And that is going to differ from counselor to counselor as well. I don't have a structured approach with my clients, but a lot of therapists do have more of a structured approach. So it's going to be different. And I think that's one of the cool things about this career is that you can be creative and make it your own and kind of create your own style. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we got to know counselor's career a little bit more. But what is one thing like about being a counselor that people might often misunderstand?
My first answer to this when I saw the question was that like we're not trying to analyze everybody in our personal lives. But I would say that we do a lot more than just listen. I think people think that when they come to us that we're just an ear to listen to them, and that's not all that we do. And I think the other thing is that you don't need to be in a mental health crisis to reach out to a counselor. I think we think of counseling as being something that is only for someone who is struggling with significant depression or has witnessed a traumatic event. And I really believe that counseling can help make things better, even if they're okay to begin with. So I think that would be one of the things that I feel misunderstood about being a counselor is that we do a lot more than we don't just see people with really bad depression. We see people that just want to make their lives better and want to feel more themselves in their life.
Okay, thank you for clearing up some of the misunderstandings we may had before. And last but not least, what is one tip you would give to students who wish to find success, whatever that may be, in their professional careers?
I would say you don't have to have it all figured out. Because I work with a lot of teenagers, a lot of youth in our community here in South Surrey, White Rock, I would say that the anxiety that I see in the teens that I work with is so different than when I was graduating. There's so much more pressure to know what you want to do in high school. You do not. I'm a rare person that knew what they wanted to do in high school. I am the minority on that. And so that pressure, I would say that you need to have it all figured out and need to know what you want to do, where you want to go with your career it's just not true. And I think your generation and my generation is different than our parents' generation because we no longer have to do a certain career and we work at the same company for the rest of our lives till we get our pension. We have the flexibility to figure out what works for our lives and what brings us joy and what brings us a sense of purpose in our lives. So I would say you don't have to have it all.
Thank you. I'm sure that was really helpful for some of our students today. And is there anything else about your journey you would like to share with our students before we go to the Q&A session?
No, I think the only thing that I would say is that if you are looking to do a career in counseling, you don't have to have it figured out. A lot of people go into this profession to kind of get a better understanding of who they are as well. And you learn this stuff along the way. And it's important for us to be open to doing our own therapy as counselors. Not only because it's helpful so that we know what's coming up for us when we're with the client, but also so that we can know what it feels like to be in the client's seat.
Thank you. Then our moderator, Annika, will be relaying the questions in the chat. So feel free to send any questions through the chat.
Hi, Ms. Hamilton. I'm Annika, and I'm the moderator for today. One of our questions is, how do you balance work life as someone in private practice?
That's a really good one, especially for counselors, because we hear a lot of hard stuff. One of the best things that when I was in grad school and I was doing my practicum, one of my supervisors, she would pick a spot on the LA freeways to kind of visualize putting all of the things that she heard today in that place to pick up on the way to work the next morning. And that was one of the best things that I heard, was just to kind of have a container for the stuff that you hear, to be able to separate that from your personal life. I would say work-life balance. I have all my best friends are therapists, to be honest. So I have a lot of support, and if we're having trouble with something, we bounce ideas off of each other, and then of course, so I'm able to kind of separate myself from the things that I hear. I see it as a real privilege to be able to bear witness to those intimate parts of people's lives, and I want to be really respectful of that. And so I leave that in the office and just come back into my regular life. And I self-care wise, I cook, I spend time with family, I get outside and do hikes. Whatever my body needs, really.
Mm-hmm.
I also do my own therapy, and that is a huge part of me continuing to learn about myself and to be able to put that work-life balance into place.
Yeah, I'm sure it's super important to compartmentalize those type things. Ruth has a question. Do you give counseling advice to your friends and family? If so, how is their reception of it?
I guess I sometimes do, not often. My friends, again, like I said, my friends are all therapists, so we do tend to talk about some like heavy stuff together, but it's very mutual, it's very reciprocal. With my family, sometimes it is a part of me being a therapist, is because I bring so much of my personality into the room. It is kind of hard to turn that off, because it's just that I'm an empathic and compassionate person, and I am going to kind of zero in on the person that's not engaging, that's feeling maybe lonely at a gathering. Not that that's happening right now with COVID, but I do kind of, their reception to it has never been bad, because I think my friends and family all know me well enough that they know my intentions, that I'm not trying to therapize them or tell them what to do. I would say I don't give a lot of advice. It's mostly more just listening and helping them explore things.
What was your favorite course in high school, and how did it impact your career choice?
Okay, so that's a tough one, because I went to Elgin Park, and high school was not a good time for me. So English, I liked English. I did English Lit at AP in grade 12, and that was a good course. Just to be totally honest, I am where I am because high school was really hard for me.
It makes sense. Okay, so Avia has a question, and is there anything you wished you knew about your profession while you were still in high school?
Yes, I would say one of the things that I learned when I returned back to Canada with my Master's of Counseling was that I learned that in Canada, at least here in BC, MSWs, which is a Master of Social Work, can do the exact same job. And this is changing right now, But at that time, there were a lot more jobs for people who did their bachelor's of social work and master's of social work than there were for me, who did my bachelor's in psychology and a master's of arts in counseling psych.
Okay.
So that is something like, had I known that before, I probably would have gone the MSW route. But then again, I don't think I would have gotten the same counseling background. And so I think it would have just been nice to know that it's a little harder to find a job, but that's changing now.
Mrs. Wagner has a question, and it is, why did you go to LA to get your master's?
I just needed to get away. I just needed to get away.
Yeah.
My own identity separate from my community that I grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
Best thing I ever did.
Yeah. Did you travel at all?
I traveled right after high school before I started undergrad. And then mainly within California, did a lot of traveling during that time when I was in grad school.
Cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Another question, were there any experiences that helped you gain admittance into school programs in this field?
Yes, I would say the work experience that I already had. So I worked as a ABA therapist with children with autism during my undergrad. And that's helping children with autism learn different skills, life skills. So it's highly structured, and it's the most evidence-based treatment for autism. So that looks good on your resume because you're also working with families. And then I worked at a domestic violence shelter. So I would say, I think it's important when you especially apply to grad school to have some work experience in the field. You can't obviously have a counseling position because that's why you're going to do a counseling program. Mm-hmm. But you need to, they're going to look more highly on your application if you have some experience in the field, whatever that may look like.
Mm-hmm. Okay. From Miss Villeneuve's class, what skills did you take from high school despite its challenges to your university experience?
To be honest, the skill would be of letting go of high school and letting myself start fresh. That mm-hmm. I could buckle down and do well in my classes and really apply what I'm learning. It was a fresh start, I would say.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. From Rachel, what are your opinions of the portrayal of mental illness on screen? Do you think that sometimes it is glamorized?
Yes, 100%. I was working at the mental health crisis program when 13 Reasons Why came out, and it was mortifying to see kind of the fallout that happened with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Hollywood needs to stop glamorizing suicide and the portrayal of mental health and autism in the media needs to be really looked at, and they need to do a lot more research before they put anything out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What is your opinion on young people taking a gap year before post-secondary?
Do it. You have the rest of your life. What's 1 year?
What advice would you give to students that don't have it figured out yet? How can they find out what they want to do once they leave high school?
I would say start getting some work experience and kind of take a inventory of what are the things that you like about your job and what are the things that you don't like about your job, and then find kind of a trusted person, whether that it could be a therapist or it could be a parent or an auntie or an uncle that can kind of sit down with you and look at okay, these are the things you're really good at, and these are the things that you like about your current job, and kind of figuring out what am I good at and what do I love doing, and how can I make that more of my career.
Mm-hmm. That's really great advice. Can you say more about why traveling / going away for school was the best thing you ever did?
Well, I grew up here, and so South Surrey White Rock is a very small community. And for me, I'm not going to speak for everyone, but for me, I had this kind of like role within my family and my role within my friend group and community. And I wanted to figure out who I was and what I enjoyed and who I wanted to be apart from that role that I had played in everybody else's lives. So for me, it was important to live by myself, to do something that no one in my family had ever done, to live somewhere completely different, and to be able to, I also grew up in the church. And so it was like, ooh, do I want to go to church? Can I find a church that I like, that feels more like me in LA? And so things like that. It was really about identity. And I learned a lot about myself, and I'm proud of that move that I made, even though my family was terrified at first and was like, does this seem wise? And I'm like, I'm going to do it. So yeah.
Do you get more clients now or before the hit of the pandemic?
Or before the hit of no, I get way more clients now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's it for our questions in the Q&A. So I'm going to pass it back off to Fifi. Thank you so much for answering them.
Hi. I believe Fifi's run into some technical difficulties. My name's Ruth, by the way. So I will just be closing off the session for her. So I would once again like to extend a huge thank you to Mrs. Hamilton, who has volunteered her time today to talk to us about her profession. Mrs. Hamilton, is there any way that we could reach you if we wanted to schedule a counseling session, or just to follow you for some updates about your lives?
Yeah, I just actually put my email address in the chat. And yeah, if you want to schedule a session, I do have a little bit of a wait list at the moment. But if anybody also has any other questions that they didn't feel that hadn't come to them at this point, or they didn't feel comfortable reaching forward, they're welcome to contact me.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, and for those of you wondering, we'll also be sharing the email on our Instagram later this week. So I know Zoom doesn't really let you copy paste, so it is kind of a bummer. But lastly, a big thank you to everyone who has joined us today, and we hope you learned more about your interests. So that's it for this session. Have a nice day, and you are free to log out now. Thank you so much. Bye, Mrs. Hamilton.
Bye.
Have a good rest of the day.